how does Trey Lance next year, when he steps into the role that all these other guys this year were in, right? The other guys all played. Trevor Lawrence played. Zach Wilson played. Justin Fields played. And Mac Jones most definitely played. So where does Trey Lance step into that? And, the Jets are in a really weird spot because they chose one spot ahead of Trey Lance. And I think based on what we saw this year with Zach Wilson, and we get some feedback on the show from Jets fans every time we talk about Zach Wilson that we're too mean to Zach Wilson. But we saw only a little of Trey. But I think what we saw from Trey Lance, what we know of his situation, which is who he plays for and where he plays, what players he has around him. My expectation this year is that Trey Lance looks better this year than Zach Wilson does. That's my expectation this year. And again, part of that is Kittle and Debo and the run game and Kyle and all of that. But, it'll be, I don't know. Do you think we'll ever get the answer? What would Kyle Shanahan have done if he was drafting second?
That's a good question. I wonder if the moment they made the trade, they already knew Zach Wilson, so he hadn't dove fully in to Zach Wilson yet. And
you're saying they made the trade knowing the Jets were going to take him?
I mean, one thing they were pretty consistent on is they just had to make a pick between three players. And it's like we knew those three players the whole time. It was weird that they just, kind of locked into Zach Wilson, who, I think showed some flashes this season. But, my go-to guy in the NFL hated him. So
hated him, or just like hated the player
as a prospect, just the whole thing. I mean, you got it. The player, just the whole thing wasn't in out on him. Now he is physically gifted, and I remember we've talked during the season, right? He made some flash plays.
Yeah.
And Trey has a long way to go. Yeah. Little Haberman puberty.
Woo!
Robert Saleh, I saw a headline yesterday, said that Mekhi Becton, their top 10 pick a couple years ago at left tackle, is going to have to earn his job in 2022. So, that's kind of what they already got going on, shit like that. It is a much, much smoother, I would say, landing spot. Now, someone forwarded me, maybe it was an Instagram comment, maybe I saw it on our comments, that, Trey Lance is going to find out really fast that unless you go to NFC Championship games, Niners fans are going to be pissed off.
I got that same comment, yeah.
It is a unique place to kind of slide into. It's not, a little like Mac Jones, like Patriot fans were expecting to be good. Right?
I think we got a taste of it this year, John. If they don't win, it's going to be on. I think fans initially will react towards Kyle Shanahan, even though he just did what he did, taking them to the NFC Championship game. I think a lot of this is going to be, can you develop? You picked the guy, so can you develop the guy? Did you pick the right guy? You could have picked Justin Fields. You could have picked Mac. Well, we know he could have picked Mac Jones. Maybe he couldn't have. But you're right. It is a unique spot. Sorry, I don't mean to detract from the point you're making, which is he's stepping into a place that the last guy went to 2 NFC Championship games and a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and he's flawed, and he drove us all nuts, but there was stuff that he brought to the table. And the one thing, and we talked about this the other day with Lance, that they talked about how fired up they were being around the guy and the maturity and how he called Jimmy his best friend for life. And just clearly people really like the kid. I mean, he's 21, 22 years old. He's a kid, but I always marvel at young players that have a ton of pressure on them that are able to handle themselves. Like I think back to myself when I was 21, 22, like my maturity level, like it really is. I don't think the young guys get enough credit. Like, can you imagine being 21 years old and just being Trevor Lawrence and just going through what you just went through? Like, how hard that would be? Now, you could say they are more trained because of coming up in big programs. You just learn life different than just an average college kid. But still, man, I have a lot of respect for the pressure that's on these guys' back, especially in the day and age we live in, the microscope that is on the National Football League right at that position. It's no joke.
I don't know if you listened to Joe Thomas, if you got to see any of what Joe Thomas had to say on Russillo's podcast, but they were talking about Hugh Jackson. Joe's like, you kind of forget. It's not just they went 0-16, it's that they also went 1-15. So Joe's like, I played 2 years. Now, the Browns were terrible, but those 2 years, he's like, I won one game. And we'll talk about tanking later, but one thing he said was one thing these people who want to tank don't quite take into consideration is the toll that losing just takes on you. That losing takes a major toll on you. And he said he actually gave Hugh a lot of credit. He's like, I give you credit every week. He actually found ways to fire us up and like make us feel like we had a game plan that we could believe in. But when you're the quarterback, that light is even brighter and hotter. And when you're a top 1, 2, 3 type pick, right? Like I would imagine the stress on Trevor Lawrence was high. Urban took a brunt of what was Jacksonville's heat this year in Jacksonville. So there was national criticism of Urban Meyer. National criticism is easier to avoid in some ways than local criticism, but Urban took it. Zach Wilson's playing for the New York Jets. So the criticism it's national, but the hottest criticism is right there in your face every day. And it was, I think, largely about him, not so much Robert Saleh. Trey is definitely well protected in that Kyle is established. Kyle will be the first lightning rod. If Trey Lance looks bad week 1, I think we'll be talking about Trey, but Kyle's going to have to answer the tough questions, not Trey.
Who will John Lynch bash when Joe Buck asks him whose fault is this when they're losing 20-10 to the Seattle on Fox primetime?
Yeah, it'll be I don't know that Jalen Moore, he looks good. I drafted him. It wasn't his fault.
John, you guys haven't beat Seattle in 7 straight games. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I do relate to the Joe Thomas thing. I never have forgotten that feeling of going into a building the day after a loss. And it's early, right? You're showing up between 6 and 7. That we've now been in business for, not far away from like a decade. And, we've had pressure when we were in radio to rate since we've been doing this to like, we got to produce or we don't eat, find businesses. There is just, it's a fluid pressure. There's a difference between just a set this morning, like, it's bad. It gets better. Like by Tuesday or Wednesday, everyone's chilled. But that initial, I would say till lunch of just everyone, it feels like a funeral. And there's nothing like it. And that there is an element of that, which is always the pushback to like, I don't know how, cover for or just have the young guys avoid it. Like ultimately, Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson and Justin Fields have kind of seen it. I mean, Lawrence and Fields already had their coach fired. I would say that Trey had a pretty good front row seat of just seeing the ebbs and flows of like a serious high level season that went really bad and really good.
Yeah.
Had a front row seat, and he got to dabble. I really think that's key that he got to play 2 games. I would not feel great if we hadn't seen him play those. 2.5 games of reps in meaningful games. Like every rep of his mattered is pretty big. Now, like Zach Wilson, this offseason for him just to improve his throwing motion, become more accurate. The scheme stuff, and Kyle mentioned this the other day, like, I think if they think what he is intelligent-wise, like scheme isn't going to be that. Like he knows the playbook. Now it's going to really be the fundamentals, because we talk about this like the separating part of Tom Brady. And Aaron Rodgers went through the lull, and then he got it back, was like his fundamentals were shitty. Tom's and Peyton's, their fundamentals were elite. So to me, if you can hammer home the fundamentals, which you would say that Kyle, for a younger coach, is kind of a stickler for, right? And he is in a fantastic place. Now, the one question mark is just like, has Kyle ever truly developed a guy? Like he did deal with Matt Schaub, then he dealt with RG3 and he hated him. He went right to Kirk Cousins. And then he really had Matt Ryan, and then he's had kind of Jimmy Garoppolo that, while hadn't really played, had been ready-made and taught at the pinnacle of football.
Well, I think that what that creates is the question of like, how does Kyle Shanahan approach Trey Lance this year, right? And I'm going to say this year moving forward because it is this year now. Next year makes it sound like it's far away. This year makes it right now. So let's talk about the football season this year. It's not done yet. There's still a Super Bowl.
We're only like 3 months away from just going to a practice with Trey Lance taking the number 1 reps.
Competition at every position, John. He'll have to earn it. So I think one thing that'll be interesting is like when he coached RG3, what was Kyle's number 1 goal? Kyle's number 1 goal was to win games, right? It wasn't, let's set RG3 up to really be his best self 3 years from now. And by the time he worked with, Matt Ryan, it was pretty well established, like what he was. He took him to another level. The Jets this year, it didn't feel like their number 1 goal was to win games, right? They kind of let Zach Wilson play it out is almost what it felt like. You agree with that? I mean, obviously they didn't want to lose.
I think your number 1 goal is to win games, like starting week 1, but early on it was clear they really sucked.
Yeah, I wonder, like, is Kyle going to run Trey Lance like 15 times a game? Because I would say that's probably not the best thing for his quarterback development or his safety. But early on, Kyle might think that's the best way for us to win. I think that's going to be a really interesting dynamic.
Look at the Bills. I mean, they were running Josh Allen. He's paying him $150 million.
I know. No, I know. And it's
now, Josh
ideally,
I'd say Josh is a better runner than Trey.
Ideally, you can do both, and the guy protects himself, and he doesn't get hurt. But as you pointed out, Lance did get hurt this year.
Slide.
Yeah. I just think it's gonna be fascinating to me. Like, what is it? You can't go all in on just quote unquote development. Like, let's make sure you can get a. I don't know. It's a weird. I don't.
No, I'd say
put a number on that balance.
The OTAs is with a young player, to me, is all you develop, and the older guys, Debo's and the Kittles, just get to hone their craft, right? But to me, Trey development in the offseason is huge. Training camp, it gets harder. But I do think the OTA period, once they get back together, you get to mold a little clay. Ultimately made this pick. I would say that the biggest area, like this offseason, that's going to be the number one topic with the 49ers, right? It's Kyle and Trey. Like, what's it fucking look like? It's not like, is Debo, I don't know, kicks ass, we know it. Like, what's he really doing in OTAs? Who cares? Nick Bosa, they just let him stay in the, I wouldn't even make him practice. It's just like, What is Trey? Trey. It was kind of like that last year, but it was more Trey versus Jimmy. The moment Jimmy gets dealt, it's going to be just relentless. And I do think it'll be fascinating to see truly do they sign a veteran backup? Like, do they want him around, or do they feel like last year was enough and they have enough around him with Kyle already? I don't know. I think you could go both ways.
I think having a guy who, and you heard Kyle Shanahan talk about quarterback room. I think having a guy that just knows what it takes in the room is.
Well, remember the Jets didn't do that, and it was unfair to him, I think.
Yeah, what were the Jets afraid of? Somebody being better than him?
I just wonder if they
don't even. Can Fitzpatrick not be the backup for a good young quarterback because he takes his job like he did in Miami?
I mean, Joe Douglas is an offensive line guy and a tough guy, and Robert Sala is a defensive guy. Maybe you don't even think like that. What did Kyle say this year? That's the best quarterback room. Like, I value the quarterback room. Why? Because I'm in it.
Yeah, and he was talking about like the camaraderie in the room, not the most talented room. He was talking about the workability of the room.
If they do sign a veteran, it's going to be, and I don't know if this is a scheme fit, but it's going to be a Foles type. Like, they're going to want a high-level, good guy, elite character that people swear by. Say one thing for Chase Daniels. You can make fun he's robbing people. People fucking like that guy. Because I've even heard Herbert talk about him. Like, he loves him. There is a value to that. My buddies with the Bears years ago, before Nagy got there, their backup was Mark Sanchez. You know why? They're just like, we just love Mark Sanchez. People just like him in the building. He's a positive. Sometimes having a positive guy in a room. Who wants to have a miserable guy?
Nick Foles' dead cap hit. Nick Foles' cap hit this year is $10.6 million. He's not a free agent. His dead cap is 7.6.
I can see Tyrod.
Foles might just be the Bears' backup.
Foles.
Yeah. Tyrod or Jacoby. I think both those guys would be good options.
Foles. Now, granted, he had earned it because he won some playoff games and obviously the Super Bowl, but I would just think about, like, every so often, maybe every other day, just shoot my agent a text, be like, you the man, bro. Because he got in that contract with Jacksonville, because that contract is still carrying over, right? They traded for it.
Yeah.
Wasn't that part of the deal? It's like, who can trade for
why
Foles?
He's not a Colt. It was going to cost a lot. It's like, Nick, if you don't want to be the third stringer, you're going to have to give some money back. Nick's like, the hell I am.
I'll tell you, to me, the number that
tops, I got my ring, dog.
Guy, the number that tops everyone this year is Tannehill's dead cap is $57 million.